Hi there, I'm Bob Alvis, a local AV historian, veterans advocate, and resident of the Antelope Valley for many, many years. And over time, I've kind of become the local storyteller of many things about the Antelope Valley, but one thing near and dear to my heart is the story of War Eagle Field here from World War II. And being it's Veterans Day, and we're at the 75th anniversary of the end of World War II, we just passed VE Day and victory in Japan coming up in August, which was the end of World War II, and we're bidding farewell to the World War II generation as just a few of their numbers still remain. So War Eagle Field here kind of is one of those places that speaks to all generations of veterans that have served here in the United States since the Revolutionary War and on, because it speaks to the struggles of the American soldier, man or woman, from all generations, that when they went off to war, they carried the fears, the hopes, the dreams, the possibilities, and the desire to do something beyond themselves for the greatness of this country and for our freedoms. And that story is told right here at our own War Eagle Field here in Lancaster, California, as from all over the United States at the beginning of World War II, cadets came from every state in the country to come over here to train and hopefully win those coveted silver wings of the American aviator to fly and be a pilot for the United States. Here at War Eagle Field, they would come, and as I stand here at the entrance, I was thinking of all the thousands of cadets that actually walked down this exact sidewalk and through these portals into War Eagle Field. And right here at this location, there was a wishing well that was originally built right here. And as the cadets would come with their dreams, they would pass this wishing well. And the wish was that they would succeed here and they would go on to become the pilots that they so wanted to be, because it was their pride, it was their hometown, they wanted to be looked up to, and they wanted to be something more than just the soldier. They wanted to be that aviator. And when they passed the wishing well here, they realized their dreams were represented by that wishing well. Well, a couple guys that I've interviewed over the years, two different stories of the American soldier and the loss of the dream and also the realization of the dream that they wanted to achieve when they went through this portal here. One cadet that I met his name was J.J. Collins, and he was from Grand Rapids, Michigan. And he was one of those cadets that dreamed of flying. And when he left his hometown, he was given a hero's send-off from his school, his parents, his friends. They were all looking up because the little hometown hero guy was going off to become the aviator in World War II. When he came here to train, he walked down this exact same sidewalk and through those portals, and he started the process of realizing his dream. But his dream was never to happen, because there was a failure involved in it that just was so hard to overcome. He had problems with night vision, and he just could not fly an airplane at night. And so his instructors washed him out, which broke his heart, because he realized at that point the hopes and dreams of his and that of his community that sent him here were also not going to be realized. So he told a really heartbreaking story of when he walked out of these portals here for the very last time. He stood here at the wishing well that was at the front, and he took his aviator wings off of his collars of his tunic, which is resemblance of this here on my hat here, the prop and the wings. And he stood at the wishing well, and he threw his wings into the wishing well, realizing that his dreams had been basically shattered. But little did he realize that that was not the end of his journey in World War II, because he was still an American soldier. And he just transferred into another aspect of serving this great country. And he said, looking back, he goes, it was probably one of the most humbling things that ever happened to me, but it was also one of the greatest things that ever happened to me because of the friendships that I made after I'd lost out on that opportunity. And he served this country and was proud of his service to this country, even though he had failed. But at the end, he did not fail us as a nation, because he continued to serve, and he did so honorably. On the other side of the ledger, a very good friend of mine, John Hedenberg, walked down this same sidewalk here and passed this wishing well. And his dreams would be realized. He would become that pilot, and he would fly combat in World War II. And in later years, when his health was deteriorating, he lived in Santa Clarita there, and I would go pick him up, and I would give him a ride around to different veterans events, and we would share time, and he would share his time here at War Eagle Field and how special that was for him, and how it was the beginning of a journey to his flying combat in Europe in World War II for the 479th Fighter Group. And I love P-38s, and he was a P-38 pilot, and that was our bond. And when one time I told him, I said, War Eagle Field is still there. You can go out and visit it. And he said, oh, Bob, could you take me there? Could you please take me there? And I said, absolutely. He could hardly walk. He was very frail. And so I put him in my truck and I drove him out here. And around on the back side here was where the landing strip was. And he had me drive out there, and he had me help him out of my truck. And he stood at the beginning of the runway there. And he stood there for almost an hour, thinking of his youth and the beginning of his journey in World War II as a pilot. And he shared stories with me that were just so inspirational to me, because he was so driven, and he was all about this country. He was all about our freedoms and what it would take to defend it. And he was willing to lay his life down for all of us to achieve that goal, not only for him, but for his future family. So before we left, he looked down and he saw a small piece of the runway that was still there. And he says, Bob, can you get me that piece of runway there? And I said, yeah, absolutely. So I picked it up, and he held it in his hand. He says, I'm taking this home. I want to give it to my son. And when my son is struggling, I want him to realize how I struggled as a young cadet, and the fears and the concerns I had whether I was not going to succeed. And I did, and this is a remembrance of my struggles in my life that I overcame, and I achieved my dreams. John was a good man. He passed away, and I was asked to speak at his funeral down in Santa Clarita there. And when I showed up, his wife said, you are the one person at the end of John's life that made the most difference and made him the most happy, because for him to go back and share what he did and relive what he did as a youth meant so much to him, Bob. And I could really not understand where I was at in a part of his remembrance here. And she goes, I want you to get up there and speak about his military time during World War II. I knew that John, after the war, walked away from flying. After flying countless combat missions, hair-raising heroism in the air over France and Germany, came back. He went off to college, became a psychologist, and ended up becoming a therapist in Beverly Hills, Hollywood, for the elites of those communities. He had a good life. He had an amazing life, taking care of the mental aspect of the people down below. They never ever knew what he did in World War II until I stood up there at the podium at his funeral and paid tribute to his honor, his service to this country, and what he did for us. And afterwards, people came up to me and said, oh my gosh, I never knew. I cannot believe it. And even his own son came up to me and says, "I am so jealous of you, Bob." And I said, "Why would you be jealous of me?" And he says, "Well," he goes, my dad shared stories with you. He never shared with me." And I said, "And I'm jealous of you." And that moment when, how do I look a son in the eye that was trying to connect to his father who had just passed away, and how do I bridge that? And God laid it on my soul to just say a simple sentence to him, and I said, "You know what? I'm jealous of you." And he goes, "How could you ever be jealous of me?" I go, "Because you got to call him Dad. And that's the most important thing to a son, is you got to call him Dad. He was only my friend, but he was your father. And he was a great man, and he did so much for us over the years. And not only his service to his country, but also to his community. And he was a good man and a good family man." And I think back to the character that he got when he walked down this sidewalk, past this wishing well right here, and through those gates, and started his journey into his life of service. And that's what I want to kind of just wrap this up on, because for Memorial Day, we remember the stories of the cadet Collins, and we also remember the stories of the cadet Hindenburg, John. Because it plays out by the thousands. Every man and woman that raises that hand and swears an oath to this country realizes the consequences of that oath and what it could represent. Failure, but also great successes. And as the World War II generation, here we are at the 75th anniversary. That generation, we owe them so much. And this Memorial Day is going to look a lot different than a lot of the Memorial Days we've had over the years. And I hope that on Monday morning, you take some time and remember the greatest generation and what they did for us. And you remember all those that sacrificed and served and laid down their lives on our behalf here in this great country. Because at the end of the day, they did it all for our freedoms. And this is why we continue to fight for our freedoms today. And we will continue to fight for freedoms in our future. Not because we're selfish and we want it just for us, but because they paid such a heavy price to make sure that we have the opportunity to embrace those freedoms. So with that, I want to thank you for taking some time out of your day today. And I hope you got a little bit of inspiration from my little story here about two cadets that walked here in Lancaster and flew off into our nation's future and served it honorably. Thank you.